So welcome to the talk that is now known as the WordPress Powered Startup. This talk has gone through a couple of different names. First it was WordPress for Web Apps. Then it was renamed to Using Your Favorite CMS to Build the Next Big Startup. And now it's landed on something I think is a little bit more concise. So the WordPress Powered Startup, basically we're going to be talking about how you can build an awesome app or a web app or any type of product, startup style product with WordPress. But first of all, who am I? I'm Chris Van Patten. I'm an American. I'm happy to be back here in Canada and see a lot of familiar faces from the Toronto WordPress WordCamps, from Buffalo WordCamps, etc. I'm the founder and CEO of Van Patten Media. We make WordPress websites, plugins, all kinds of stuff like that. I'm also the co-host of Not a Real Job, which is a comedy / marketing / side project podcast. Check it out at NerdCast on Twitter. I'm also the creator of Blastoff, which is an email marketing plugin that lets you easily send MailChimp campaigns within WordPress. We're going to have a release of that later this year, but if you're interested, you can test it out now, and I'm happy to share the code. I'm also the developer and founder of Firsthand, which is a new application that connects you with concierge instantly in any city. So if you're going to, say, Hamilton and you want to know what's the best pub for me to check out, we have a concierge who can answer that. We're going to come back to this because this is relevant to our topic. I'll say no more now. But anyway, the WordPress Powered Startup. What is a startup? Specifically, we're going to talk about tech startups. So I really like Wikipedia's definition here. They say a startup company or startup is a business in the form of a company, a partnership, or temporary organization designed to search for a repeatable and scalable business model. Now that last part is the most pertinent, right? Because we wouldn't call Facebook a startup anymore because they've already found their repeatable and scalable business model. We wouldn't call Uber a startup anymore because they found their repeatable and scalable business model. They were startups at one point in their lifetime, but they're not necessarily startups now. So we're interested in we're interested in searching for that business model, which is why WordPress is really useful, because when we ask, well, how can we do that search faster? How can we find that repeatable business model faster? WordPress is a great way to do that because it keeps us from having to reinvent the wheel. It keeps us from having to learn new systems, new technologies, just to get something basic off the ground and into people's hands really quickly. Which for a startup is essential because you can waste a lot of money trying to figure out what this business model is going to be. I just listed all those big companies and said, well, they're not really startups anymore. Well, Twitter doesn't really have their repeatable business model. So you don't want to waste billions and billions of dollars in IPOs and still come out not really knowing how you're going to make money. And using WordPress to build your startup is a really great way to do that because it sort of cuts down on all the time that you need to develop that first version of your product. So here are a bunch of startups. Some of them are legit startups in that they're still trying to figure things out. Some are not. But these are all probably familiar names, or many of them are. And we're also going to look more specifically even at web apps, because that's kind of what WordPress is. That's where its strengths lie. And that doesn't necessarily mean you have to build a web app with WordPress, especially now that the REST API is going to be a big thing. I'm not going to get too technical and talk about all of that, but it's worth keeping in mind that I'm going to approach this from a web perspective, but it doesn't necessarily have to be. You can easily do native apps now that are powered in the back end by WordPress. So my definition of an app is a computer service that completes a task or action on behalf of a user. Pretty simple, right? It's sort of, an app has to do something at its core. So step one is that we're going to develop our startup idea. And I'm not going to spend too much time on this because this is where you come in, right? What's a problem that you need to solve? What's a solution that would be beneficial to your business or to someone else's business, right? What's a specific thing that you can do? Going back to our definition that you have to complete a task or action on behalf of the user, what's that task? What's that action, right? So as we're developing our idea, we have to ask a couple questions. One, what does it look like? Two, what data will you need to collect? And three, how will interactions feel? Now take all of those, think about it a lot, and map it out a little bit, right? So some of these are more technical, but basically like create a mind map or create a diagram or a flow chart that sort of visualizes what are the steps that I need to take to complete that task? Or what are the steps that the software needs to take to complete that task? So then step 2, once we've got a good sense of like, here's what I want it to look like, here's how the task needs to be completed, here are the different steps in that process, we need to choose a path. Now, there are 2 paths. One is the concierge path, and the other is the functional path. Now, what does that mean? A concierge, a slight modification to our definition earlier, is a human disguised as a computer service that completes a task or action on behalf of a user. So for something like Uber, what if when you requested your cab, instead of automatically routing, checking your GPS and sending your information to local drivers, what if they just collected your GPS coordinates and then had a map of the drivers and they routed the drivers to you, right? More like a traditional taxi service works. That means that that company wouldn't have to spend all the effort and all the time building this technology stack. They could start right away and get a sense of how that would work. Because Uber's innovation isn't how they connect you to drivers. It's not the whatever technology they're using, whether it's WebSockets or however they're in real time connecting you to drivers. Their innovation is that it's an app with a button. You don't care how everything else happens. You care that you press a button on an app and a car comes to you, right? So try not to think so much about what the technology has to look like. Think again back to that original definition. How are we completing that action or task? And a concierge approach to this is basically a way to do that without building a lot of technology, right? Because that back-end stuff, to the end user who doesn't understand tech, that's all invisible. So if you can figure out a way to do that with human intervention, that can cut down on a lot of time building a product. And within WordPress and the web world, there are a lot of tools you can use that are going to help you do that. I've listed 3 form plugins. There's obviously Gravity Forms, which I think most of us know is a paid plugin, Contact Form 7, a free one, Ninja Forms, free with paid add-ons. Those are really great ways to build your form and get people to submit information into your service. Now, form doesn't necessarily mean name, email address, and message box, right? You can build any kind of form that's relevant to your app. And then on the right side there, I have 2 other services. The first one is IFTTT, and the next one is Zapier. Now these do kind of similar things in that they plug different services together, right? So with IFTTT, you can say if this, then that. So if a new post is published on my website, I want you to send an email to so-and-so, which could be an interesting way if we think back to that Uber idea, right? If someone presses that button, send me an email, and then I can route a car to them. Zapier is very similar, but it does a lot more. It's a lot more powerful. It has more integrations, more capabilities, and it is paid. So there you go. So the other option we have here is functional. So this is a real computer service that completes a task or action on behalf of your user. Now obviously all startups want to get to this point eventually because that's where we get the scalability factor. That's where we can grow because we don't have a real human sitting at the phone waiting for calls to come in, right? We have a computer service that's automating that task. And this is probably the most relevant to us, as I'm imagining that we're mostly developers in the developer track. So our next step, now that for the purposes of this, we'll say that we're going the functional route, but we need to map our idea to the WordPress data model. So this is basically sort of figuring out how we can take our idea, our concept, and smush it into WordPress, right? So what is the WordPress data model? It's all this. It's the database, it's posts, pages, all this sort of stuff. How can we map our concept into WordPress? Now this is seemingly a very simple idea, but this has huge ramifications on how you can build your app, how you can build your service. So there are 4 object types in WordPress. The first one is posts. And that includes pages as well. Any type of custom post type, which also includes media, menu items, anything that WordPress stores in that WP posts table. Taxonomies. So the two that we all know, obviously, are tags and categories, but you can create custom taxonomies as well. And a taxonomy is basically a way of categorizing information or fitting it into different buckets. Users. Another obvious one, someone has to register for your site and log in. The users table is where that happens. And then comments. So comments are sort of interesting in that they are technically a sub-object of posts, right? You can't have a comment unless it's attached to a post. However, comments are interesting because they can do meta. So these are the 3 post types, or the 3 object types rather, that can do meta, custom meta. Taxonomies currently cannot have metadata attached to them. That may eventually change. There's a long-term roadmap to change that, so taxonomies can get metadata as well, but right now they can't. So posts, users, and comments, with all of these, you can store key value data with all of these. So a good example of that is maybe with posts. You might, if you have a blog, you might store related posts as post meta. With a user, if you want to store extra information about that user, maybe you want to get their phone numbers, you can send them text messages or calls or things like that. That gets stored as user meta. With comments, they don't traditionally get meta associated with them. That's not a feature that's commonly used, but you would say that the name of the comment poster is a bit of meta, the email address, their website, and you can collect other fields as well. So we need to map your idea to the WordPress data model, which is posts, taxonomies, users, and comments as sort of the 4 overarching object types. So we're going to jump right in. Instagram. Instagram is a very easy one. Every time you upload a new image, that's going to create a post. Every time you comment on that post, it's a comment. And then likes we can also do with comments. So something that's really interesting about comments is that we can give them types. Now this isn't deeply supported in terms of the WordPress list comments functionality, so anything on the front end. But on the back end, you can query by comment types, you can sort by comment types, you can do all kinds of stuff with comment types. And it's a developer-only feature, but it's super powerful. So you might have your regular comments type, which is just comments. And that's anytime anyone goes onto Instagram and posts some message to that photo. But we can also have those likes as well. So we can say, if you like that, we're actually going to insert a comment into the database with a type like. And what that means is that later on, we can do a comment query on your user and say, I want to see all the comments that this person has left of the type like. And that's how we can say, oh, here are all the things that they've liked before in our Instagram clone. So that's an easy one. Yelp, another easy one. Every post is basically an entry in the system. Every review is a comment. Map data, hours of operation, pricing, all of that gets stored as meta. This is such a common use case that there are actually a couple companies out there that build entire theme and plugin stacks that make it really easy to build review sites, like Yelp. Firsthand, so I mentioned this earlier. It's our service that is a sort of a concierge that you can get connected to in cities across the world. So when you ask a question of the concierge, we create a new post. And then below that is a thread of messages, basically like your texting app on an iPhone, right? And all of those are comments. Sometimes we move questions between different statuses. So our guides can go in the back end and see, here are the questions that haven't been answered. Here are the questions that haven't been claimed by a guide to be answered. That's taxonomies, right? We have a post taxonomy that is question status. And so they can easily query by different statuses to see, okay, here are the questions that I want to answer. Here are the questions I don't want to answer. Those cities across the world get mapped to taxonomy. So we have a New York taxonomy, we have a Barcelona taxonomy, a London taxonomy, a Toronto taxonomy, or term rather, within a location taxonomy. So again, we can not only now query by the status of a question, but we can also query by its location, making it really easy for our guides to drill down and see specific types of information. And of course, Uber, the billion-dollar elephant in the room. We could easily build that, well, slash the easily there. We could build that in WordPress. So every time that a user registers, we create a user for them, right? Every time that a user requests a ride, anytime they press that magic button, we're going to create a new post. And we're going to use the browser's geolocation API to grab their latitude and longitude and submit it with that post as post meta. Then, once the driver claims that ride, we can move it from one taxonomy term to another, say, unclaimed rides to claimed rides. And then we can start on the driver's side. If they leave their browser open, we can poll their browser to get their geolocation every couple seconds, so maybe every 10 seconds. And we can submit that as a comment with the type driver location. And we can start adding those, and so on the other end, the user can refresh the page and see where the driver is in relative real time. Now, obviously, in all of these options, WordPress might not be the best long-term solution, especially for this example, right? Because Uber has a lot of real-time location tracking going on. For legal reasons, they have to keep track of some of these things. And WordPress isn't really designed to scale in that way. But Uber obviously has gotten to the point where they validated their idea. In their early days, a solution like this might have made sense, a really simple approach to the idea that was something that could probably be easily built in a couple weeks by an experienced developer, rather than a couple of months trying to build a really complex backend with real-time socket communication and all that kind of stuff. So then step 4 is to start building. It's really that easy. And the main thing that you're going to do when you're doing this kind of stuff is deal with forms. Now, earlier I mentioned Ninja Forms, Gravity Forms, Contact Form 7. Those are all really great options if you want more of a visual, easy-to-use solution. But if we want to build our own forms, we have to do a little bit more work. Now, I'm not going to show you the HTML for a form. Hopefully you've all seen that at some point, you know, the form tag and inputs and all that. But if you want to process that in WordPress, you're going to need to do a bit of extra work. So let's go to the GitHub, if I can figure out how to get out of here. Hello. You seem to have frozen my computer.
Are you in presentation mode?
Yeah, but the escape key's not working. Also, power key's not. Oh, something happened. We've got plenty of time, so I'm not too worried.
Oh, we're back.
Maybe.
Oh, that was your Mac that did the whole thing. Wow.
Just a second. My keyboard is not working. It's not a good sign. I'm just going to turn it off.
We'll get you a Post-it.
Yeah, I'll write some code for you that way.
Maybe there's a bottle of tequila on the delete key.
It's possible. I did just go to Mexico a couple weeks ago, so tequila might have spilled on it. While I do that, we've got so much time, I'll take some questions. Aha, there we go. Any questions right now before I show you code? No, good. All right, just a moment. We're almost back on.
Is concierge up?
Sorry?
Concierge, your concierge service?
Oh.
First hand, sorry.
Yeah, no, it's fine. Almost. We did so I just got back from Barcelona. I spent a couple months there, which is where I came up with the idea. And we did a trial run with it there, doing more of that concierge approach as well, where we didn't build out the full app. But hopefully we'll have it ready for the iPhone in a couple weeks with an entire WordPress backend powered by the REST API. Okay, Chrome did not shut down correctly. I am aware. Okay, as soon as I get the Wi-Fi connected, we're good to go. There we go.
There's like a zillion icons there I've never seen before.
Got a lot going on. Just gonna cancel that. Why it's going so slow? It was good earlier. Has anyone else had problems today with internet? No, No, that's fine. If worse comes to worse, I can do it live.
Well, I'm still trying in school, so just
So it's all Paul's fault.
it's Paul's fault. Yeah.
I'm like Boy Scout.
I was trying to get hobbies.
Yeah, we can see that, right?
Yo, all right. I'm hanging out with Alan for the rest of the day.
Suddenly that one's very slow too.
If
You can remember that. That's impressive.
It's only 8 digits. It's only 100 megabits.
All right, so here we go. This is the whole thing.
Okay, we're back in action, all right.
So basically what we've done here, or what I've done here, is I built a very simple function. This is literally like super basic. I didn't even test it in live WordPress, so it's all sort of take it with a grain of salt. But basically the idea is that if the user's logged in, this line here, we're going to hook in on init, which is a very early hook in the WordPress process. Not super early, but early enough. And we're going to run our process form function on init. So here's our process form function. This is for a theoretical clone of Uber. If the server request method is post, it means if a form has been submitted. If it's not that, we're going to close out. We're going to return early so we don't actually do anything to the database. Easy enough. Then we're going to insert a new post. And this post we're going to call new ride, and we're going to give the post, we're going to set the post author to the current user. If I had taken more time and thought this through a little more, I would have also added a post type of like car ride or something like that, right? Rather than polluting the normal post table or the normal post type. Little inside baseball at the end there, that true just means that if this doesn't go well, if our insert post fails, we're going to get a WP error instead of false. So then basically what we do here is we say, if this is a WP error, just return that and let something else figure it out. But other than that, but if that does not return, we assume, great, we have a new post, awesome. So what we're going to do is we're going to check if it's a number, the post latitude variable. Now, if you worked with forms before, you know what that is doing. If not, basically PHP, every time you submit a form, it will take all of your forms, it'll take the name of those inputs and map them to elements or to array items within the post variable here. So that's going to take whatever was submitted as the latitude, and it's going to add it to our post as post meta title latitude. And we're going to do the same thing for longitude. And then what we're going to do is we're going to run an action, new ride created, and we're going to include the post ID. Great, so we've done all that. Now what do we do? So from there, we could very easily hook into our action, new ride created, look for that latitude and longitude data, and then go over to our users table. And there are some PHP functions available, some math functions that'll make this easy, or easier. And we can look at all our users who have the user role, let's say drivers. We can look at all of their latitude and longitude, and we can see, if we have them checking in every minute to update their latitude, we can see who's actually the closest, and we can do a query for the people who are the five closest to the latitude and longitude that we got here. And then we can use the Twilio API maybe to send them a text message and say, hey, there's somebody at this address, go find them. Or we can send them an email if we wanted to do that. Or we can send them a push notification via a RESTful push service, right? So you have a lot of options there. This is really basic, and I didn't want to do too much code, so we're going to leave the code here. But that should give you a sense of sort of how this kind of thing works, right? We're creating posts, think of them as objects, kind of. We're adding meta to those objects, and then we're executing actions when those things happen. We're creating basically a chain reaction of events that happen, which is really what a web service is, right? A web service does a lot of different things in a certain sequence following your input, your directions. So that's basically it. Let's see if my keynote was saved. Hallelujah. Where was I? Here. Great. So we went to the GitHub. We came back from the GitHub. Thank you. It's 5 o'clock. If you've got any questions, we can ask. I'll take them now. The slides will be at this URL later on. That's my Twitter handle. Please tweet questions, comments, suggestions, anything like that. And while we take questions, we're just going to let these cat videos play. Cool. Thank you.
I'm in cat.